Welcome to the lABLEd podcast, a show about disability, illness and difference. I'm Lucy.
And I'm Alice. And that's Lola.
Kaleidoscope identity, and this is who I'm meant to be. I'm just labeled me. I'm just labeled me.
Hi guys! Don't forget, in this episode, I might swear, Lucy might cry, and you can check out details of the trigger warnings on our website.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the lABLEd podcast. My name is Lucy, and this is my co-host, Alice.
Hi everybody, and that is Lucy doing her serious hospital radio voice again, rather than her podcasting on a Friday night with a drink voice like a normal person.
Yeah, it's a force of habit. I can't help it.
You need to get the plum out your mouth and the stick out your ass, and then we'll have another go.
Loosey goosey. How are you, Alice? All right?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a lABLEd full day. We've been doing lots of exciting things, planning lots of really exciting content, talking about all the celebrities we're going to have on, which is exciting.
Are you name dropping on purpose just in case they hear this and go, the celebrities we want? Are you just going to name drop them?
I was going to, because they're not going to hear this, but I am, and I don't want to get people's hopes up and be like, oh yeah, we're going to have fucking Winona Ryder on the podcast.
I can do a few accents, so maybe we could pretend.
You're gonna pretend to be Winona Ryder.
Yeah. So how's it? Your week's been all right though. So are you sick of seeing my face?
Not that sick yet. I mean, and besides, I don't see so well, so I have to appreciate what I can see when I see it.
Very true. Very true. So, Alice, do you want to tell everybody about our guest today? It's really exciting.
Well, speaking of podcasts, we've got a fellow podcaster on the show with us this week. It's really exciting. Guys, a big round of applause, me and Lucy, for Amy Amantea.
International, all the way from Canada.
Can we say we're big in Canada yet? Or have we got a way?
Yeah, you're huge here. Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
We'll send you a signed photograph.
Oh, I'd love it. I'll hang it in my office.
Canada is still my, when things in the UK eventually just really all hit the fan. Canada is certainly my husband's first choice for places to run to. So it'd be helpful if we can get established out there. So
we hear that a lot, especially with all the political unravelings in the United States. I get a lot of phone calls from friends down there that say, so what's it like to live in Canada, and how do I get across the border? Well, I wish I could tell you it was that simple, but
yeah, no, it's fine. I've got family in New Zealand. I'm hoping that'll get me through there.
New Zealand's in awesome shape, so that's
exactly.
No, there's no Ronavirus. We're all right there with the Rona. Yeah.
Well, and I think Jacinta Ardern should just be made Queen of the World, because I think she is amazing.
Yeah,
I agree.
And it's the land of the hobbits, isn't it?
Well, and have you ever seen a kakapo? It is a parrot owl, and it is technically it's a parrot, but it looks kind of flat faced like an owl, and I don't think they're flying birds, and they're a bit like, not in looks like dodos, but in the way that, the reason all the dodos are dead is because we turned up and they were just so friendly and so had never seen people before that we just picked. Yeah. Kakapos are like that, basically. But they live in New Zealand. I think they're native only to New Zealand.
Are they brightly colored like parrots?
Yeah, bright green. I don't think you're allowed to, but I would have one as a pet if I lived there. So
thank you, David Attenborough.
if I would recommend to anybody who's interested in kakapos and other animals the BBC series Last Chance to See with Stephen Fry and Mark Howardine. They go and see kakapos, and a kakapo tries to mate with Stephen Fry's head.
Oh, that sounds like a great episode. Is it described?
I imagine so, because it's BBC.
Yeah.
I've got it on DVD. It's probably 10 years old now, so I don't know, but it's definitely worth looking up.
I watch a lot of BBC stuff here in Canada too. I'm a big Coronation Street fan.
Yes.
I don't know how I do this. If you ladies have any thoughts on how I get myself on the show Coronation Street, I have this fantasy of writing letters and being like, "Hello, you have no blind representation on your show, or Canadian representation. I'm an actor in Canada that lives with blindness. Can I be on your show? ... You know what I mean? Like, it's my dream fantasies of being on Coronation Street. I don't know what I would do, but even if I just walked into the corner store and bought some biscuits, I'd be great.
Yeah, I've been on the set. I don't know how accessible it would be because it's all cobblestones, though.
Yeah, that's okay. I would find a way. If you want it hard enough, you find a way.
She will crawl down Coronation Street on her hands and knees if she has to.
I went to the set just before they moved sets, because they moved to a bigger set, and
when I went, it was like 1994, so it's probably somewhere different now.
I went in 1994, and then I went again before they moved, because I'm that sad. And and the tour guides, because obviously they do have a character who is in a wheelchair, and I was like, "Can I ask you something? Like, how does the woman in the wheelchair get over, like, across the road?" And he was like, "You see those two planks over there? The planks of wood." And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "We put them on the floor and she just wheels over them because otherwise she can't, because of the cobbled street."
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, failing that, she just stands on the side of the road, like on the pavement, on a flat bit of pavement, and does a scene from the pavement. So if she's walking about, she just rolls over two planks of wood." And I was
going to say they seem to be very strategic about what types of, like, where she's located and what types of scenes she's in. And so I knew right away that that's all about an access thing, right? Like, you know, congratulations for having representation in a regular recurring character, which almost never happens. But let's just boost up her airtime just a little bit here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know. It's
but still a good start.
I'm a massive fan of Coronation Street, and I, like you, also want to be on Coronation Street. So if anybody from Coronation Street is listening to this, get in touch.
I'll even buy my own ticket to come out.
She's that desperate.
Relative from Canada.
It's a long flight, but I'm game.
Yeah. No,
I was in the UK once, in London once for like 2 days. On my way, so we have these tour packages in Canada, and maybe you've got them in the UK too, called Kentucky tours. You familiar? And they have different types of tours, but they're technically for people that are aged like 18 to 35, so like a real party crowd. You get on a bus and you go through Europe or any country, but they package these, and you stay in like Kentucky villages, which are like little tiny huts, or you can stay in tents, or you can have a more expensive package and stay in hotels or whatever.
Right.
And I was flying to London, staying there a couple of days, and then heading off on a bus trip that started heading over through the French Channel and then through. So it was a 16-day tour that my brother and I did together when I was 23. So my whole point in the story is that I actually was a sighted person when I visited the UK, and I'm no longer a sighted person. So it would be a very interesting trip to go back and maybe connect with you fine folks. But to just go back and explore the city and see how different. I mean, I know it's going to be very different just from an experiential perspective, but I love to travel. And so part of coronavirus for me is a feeling trapped, you know, like I don't get to go. I don't get to do anything, not even a weekend trip in my own backyard, you know?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. we went to, my husband and I, before we were married, our first ever like proper holiday anywhere was we went to LA together. And then we went back as part of our honeymoon 7-8 years later. And my sight condition is degenerative. So there's definitely been some change in my sight during that time. And it is strange how, you know, even losing a little bit of my sight in those few years, I can absolutely remember walking around and thinking, this didn't look like this, but it, you know, it was the same. But as you say, your experience of it and the way that you kind of process things visually, and I think the impact that vision or lack of vision has just on the kind of the atmosphere of a place as well can be really changed quite a lot.
It's really interesting for me to hear that sort of perspective, because obviously I have sight, so, and I've never really
rub it in. Why don't you?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Just kidding.
It is quite. I mean, I obviously take things like that for granted, I suppose, like them looking differently, not because somebody's like built something in the way or whatever, but just purely because you know your sight has changed. It's something that is quite eye-opening for me. So
no
it's
pun
funny,
intended.
I think about it in a way of like, you know, if you're friends with somebody and you see them when you're like 12, 13, 14, and then say you don't see them for 10 years and you see them again and you know it's the same person, but they've changed visually, like they've changed noticeably because they've become an adult.
Or something.
No, because they've gone from 12 to 22.
Oh, yeah, okay,
so
yeah.
they look different because they've aged, but they're still identifiable as the same person. But there is something.
Them. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are things that are fundamentally different about them, even if it's not necessarily stuff that you could kind of explain. I for me, that's what it was like. It's the, you know, it's the same person, but they've grown and everything about them has grown, or it's the same place, but it seems, so for me, like LA, because of, I think the change in my sight went from being this bright, really bright, sunny place to just, it wasn't grey and overcast. I mean, you know, LA smog and all of that, but just walking around it, it wasn't as sunshine, blue sky, beach as it was the first time. The colours were just a bit more muted.
That's interesting. I don't know if you find this, Alice, with your sight. I find if people change something about themselves, so like I have a friend who has this gorgeous, you know, red hair and wears these really thick rimmed black glasses. Yeah. And for me, she's got very, very white skin, very like porcelain skin. So for me, there's a lot of really great contrast there, and it's long, red, curly hair, right? So there's lots of
amazing.
I swear to God, if I could choose my own look, that would be it. Anyways, so yeah, a little in love with her humanity and her as a person. But beside all of that, the minute somebody changes something, so like, you know, 1 year decides to chop her hair all off and dye it platinum blonde and get a pair of white rimmed glasses, I can no longer tell who that person is. So even when people get new glasses, they get a new haircut, they get a tan, because my sight is a little bit like looking through Swiss cheese. It's got a bunch of holes in it. Right. And so if I'm the kind of person who can only see like the top corner of your forehead, that curly red hair is going to stand out in that patch. And then of course you go change it to blonde and I go, wait, who are you?
Yeah.
And it could be my own parent, you know, like somebody I know all the time, or even voices. I remember being someplace on transit and somebody said, "Hey, Amy, how are you?" And I had no idea who they were. And it was somebody that I had grown up with my entire life. But for context, I would never have seen, they live in a different province than I do. And we're visiting and we happened to bump into each other, which was so random to begin with. But the fact that I would never have bumped into this person, I couldn't recognize who they were just by voice.
That must be quite disorientating, Amy, for you.
Sometimes it can be, yeah.
So how how do you deal with that? Once they've said, oh yeah, I've had a haircut and I've dyed my hair blonde, like, how do you go, okay, obviously,
Honestly,
I still want to be your friend, but just because you dyed your hair blonde and cut it all off.
Why the fuck would you do that? Are you just messing with me? Don't you know this about me? I want people to live their own lives and do their thing and whatever. And that's all good. So but usually I try and sort of pick on them with a little bit of humor.
I would rather do that than, I think one of my things that I hate, and I absolutely understand why people do it, but when people come up to me and go, oh, hi, Alice, it's such and such. And I'm like, don't tell me who you are. Like, it might take me a second to work out who you are, but if somebody comes up and goes, oh, hi, Alice, it's Kate. I'm like, fuck off, Kate. I don't care anymore.
Blind. I can see you. Like,
something about it really rubs me up the wrong way. I think it's just that presumption before they've even asked,
that's
can
so
you see
interesting.
Me? I hate it.
That to me, it's like when people say to me, when I say, oh, they'll say, what did you do at the weekend? And I say, oh, I went for a walk. And they go, there are some people who will like to point out about the fact, I don't spend most of my time with them, but they will go, well, you didn't though, did you?
Yeah.
And you're like, no, well, in my head I did, but I didn't physically put both feet on the floor and move them. If that's what you mean.
What are you going to say? I went for a sit.
I went for a wheel.
People say that to blind people all the time when I say something like, okay, well, I'll see you later. And they go, really? And it's like, you don't have to change your... I watch television. Thank you very much. And I actually get a little... not frustrated. I don't want to pick on anybody too seriously, but I have a lot of guide dog friends who, when they say in their emails, when they sign off, it's like, from Amy and Rover, and it's like, nah, like, or woof woof. Rover says woof woof, and I go, yeah, okay.
You haven't heard the start of the podcast, have you? Start of our intro is Lucy going, hi, it's Lucy, and that's Alice, and I go, hi, it's Alice, and then my guide dog barks, and I go, that's Lola.
Okay, but if your guide dog barks, that's a different thing, right?
Because your dog is actually speaking.
Yeah, exactly. That's like when your baby's crying in the background and you're like, oh yeah, that's the baby. I'm just ignoring them right now. It's all good, whatever. Or the telephone rings or the doorbell goes off and it's like, oh, that's the Amazon package at my door. But I guess for me, there's so many people that do that. And I think to myself, I do a lot of advocacy work. So I think about what it looks like when mayor and council sees your letter about, I can't get access to affordable housing from so-and-so and my dog Rover. And you're like, it just doesn't seem to fit for me.
I mean, let's face it though. Everybody's got that weird aunt who signs the Christmas card from Derek and Jean and their dog Margaret. Yes. I mean, I don't know who would call a dog Margaret, but you're like, yeah, it's really nice. Thank you for signing your Christmas card from the dog to me.
This is why I say I don't like to pick on it too much, but it's just one of those things that I always notice, very staunchly about emails that come from people who are blind or partially sighted, and then I ask myself, why?
And I've thought about it, and for me, it's kind of dark, but I've been a little bit worried. So I'm on the waiting list for a new guide dog, and Lola's not quite 10, but she's going to be retiring. I'm going to be replacing her, and she's going to stay with us and stuff like that, but she won't be my guide dog anymore. And so I definitely have feelings about being like Lola's in all the artwork and stuff for the pod. It's like, well, if this pod goes on for 10 years, somebody's going to figure out dies.
Alice, just make sure it's a black Labrador. We'll be fine. Because we could just change the name at the beginning.
Because we get so much choice. You get so much choice.
Yeah, I have said my preferences for a black dog because more than anything, yellow fur will just show up all over everywhere. All my nice dark jeans. So.
I was there. Do you know what I actually thought when you said I have a preference of a black dog? I thought that you would want a black dog so it's more invisible than a yellow dog. Like, you know how people wear black clothes when they're like working in theatre to hide themselves? It's a bit like, let's
I want to
have a
be
black
in,
dog.
I want to be incognito. I'm hoping if I have a black Labrador, people won't notice the fucking great white harness that she's wearing.
Right. Listen, it's
Well,
Friday.
now what you need is a white dog. You need
Yeah.
a dog that's pure white so that it blends in and nobody really notices.
Yeah. Put an invisibility cloak on it.
Here's a great gag. I'm always, like I wear my hat of educator, of advocate, of consultant, of artist, and blind comes either before or after all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And I will be working on an exhibition that plays a little bit like an arts installation exhibition for next year. Hopefully, anyways, got to get some funding, but that plays a little bit on some of the themes of blindness. And so one of the things I'm going to do is use a harness, almost exactly like what you're talking about. And the exhibition is about sort of, it'll look like free floating objects.
Mm.
And it's really about the amount of stuff that I have to take with me to function as a blind person. So, whether that's, an umbrella is a common tool, but if you have a white cane and an umbrella, or a guide dog and an umbrella, and then you have to use your phone to like get the bus schedule. And then you have to use like, your GPS to do this, and like it all adds up, right?
Yeah.
But one of the fun gags that I am thinking about in my own life, and I'm constantly looking at gags that are sort of a way to not make fun of blindness, but just to get people to laugh with us instead of at us.
Yeah.
Is and in disability in general, and it's a fine line, right?
Yeah.
Is to have somebody walking with just a harness and with no dog.
Yeah.
And just to see this is like the gag shows on TV,
Yeah.
right? Just to see what people do when you okay, Robert, go forward. Okay, and I don't know what your commands are for potty time, but we've got several depending on the guy, busy or whatever.
Busy is
that what you use? So it's like you stand there with a harness with no dog and you go, okay, busy. And then you mime picking up the poop, and then it's like, and
that
just
sounds brilliant.
Just to see what other people would do. A friend of mine and I, there's a really busy corner where I lived in downtown, and we keep playing with this idea of having somebody filming us, but it's a four-way street corner, northeast, southwest, and a big square, and it's constantly busy. There's huge numbers of people walking in all directions, and she's got a guide dog. I use a white cane, and so we were going to play this joke on people where we keep missing each other crossing, but we're calling out for each other. And then she stops on like the north corner, and I stop on the south corner, and I go, Marco, and she goes, Paula.
Yeah.
Just to see if other people would be like, oh, I wonder if the two of them are trying to find it. Like, a part of me just wants to laugh at the entire scenario of how people are so involved in their own lives that they just don't pay attention to what's going on. And I just thought, what a great little YouTube skit that would be.
I am a genuine believer that humor is a great balm to the disability experience. Like, if I didn't have a sense of humor about any of this, I would probably really, really struggle, because there are days sometimes where all I want to do, you think about the situations I get in sometimes, and you think, this is an absolutely awful state of affairs, and you think, well, you've got two options: you either laugh or cry, and almost always laughing helps so much with the being able to deal with it and process it. My sense of humor is very, very dark.
Yes.
When I was a teenager, I very sadly lost about 6 friends in one school term because
Jesus
their
Christ.
disability was their bodies just gave up, sadly, and it's one of the most horrific things about my disability that I cannot bear. And I can remember saying to one of my school friends who is still alive, I just basically turned to her and I said, well, our school reunions are just going to be me and you flicking peanuts at one another from across the room. And everybody else went, oh, what? But it's true. But I was like, this is exactly like, I think you have to develop that thick skin and that.
Yes.
ability to laugh at the whole situation, because it's awful.
I think it's also really important to laugh at ableism, because I think it helps the people who are it's sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, the people who are enacting the ableism. You laugh at them, it points out the ridiculousness of what they're doing. Even like Amy said, I over the holidays we were round at a family member's house, and she started telling us what was on the dinner table, and she was like, "Oh, you can all, I don't know why I'm telling you, you can all see." And I went, "No, you can't." And she went, oh, and she was, and my brother just laughed, and I was like, honestly, she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm taking the piss." Like, I honestly don't, like, you are just being a human, and you weren't just talking to me, you were talking to the other 4 sighted people in the room, and being like, "There's the carrots," and it's just something that we do. And if you point out the ridiculousness of people's overreaction, sometimes it does bring them up and make them go, "Well, hold on, well, let's maybe rethink that for next time."
Yeah.
It's a bit like, I don't know if any of you two have seen that some TikTokers. I don't understand TikTok. I'm far too old. But some TikTokers were saying that Helen Keller didn't exist.
Oh, I did see that.
And I thought I could either get really angry about this, or I could just laugh at you, because can you hear what you're saying to us? Can you hear yourself?
Exactly.
Because you are being ridiculous. Like, just shut up.
That sounds like a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? That's exactly what I thought. I was just like, this is ridiculous. So I think laughing at ableists. What's the descriptive word for a group of ableists?
Jackasses?
A jackass of ableists.
Douchebag?
I was trying to think of something like a murder of crows, like an ignorance of ableists.
Sometimes it's just, I don't know how you guys feel, but sometimes it's just, at the end of the day, when I think about, and this hasn't happened so much during COVID times because we're all sort of in this state of isolation, but the microaggressions that happen, just like on the city bus, it takes me probably 2 hours to commute one way anywhere I need to go. And I'm getting on a bus, a conventional bus, what we call a C bus, which is like a little ferry, a sky train, which is a train that runs on a high pillar to the sky. I mean, okay. So I'm moving all these different.
Do you live in a steampunk book?
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? Listen, I'm waiting for the quantum physics beam me up Scotty machine from Star Trek, because that would just save my life in terms of commuting time.
I've said that to my husband before, and he's like, "Yeah, but what the thing about those things is that actually it destroys the original you and transports entirely new particles." And I'm like, "Well, maybe they can fix all the fucked up bits, it'll be fine."
Exactly what I'm thinking. So they either so they take away some more of my eyesight. Good luck. But so every time I get on transit, people always ask me how I lost so you're blind. Oh, so how did that happen? As if it's any of their fucking business.
I know.
But they ask you that, it wouldn't be so bad if it was one person a day. But it's every time somebody gets up from the seat beside me and a new person sits there. So on 1 2-hour bus commute, you could be asked this question 8 times.
Yeah.
And so at the end of a day, when you talk about the lived experience of disability and all of the other sort of, I don't know, barriers, I guess, but whether they're small barriers or big barriers, but there's a series of them every day, right? Mm-hmm. There's a series of things we do to just get from one place to another, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. And all of those microaggressions can add up to be like the death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have the ability to just sit back and piss your pants laughing at some of this kind of shit, you would literally drive yourself into a state of down that rabbit hole and I ain't coming out. No. And that's a reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one recommendation I can make is the great thing about having a guide dog is usually nobody sits next to me. Because I'm like, oh no, sorry, you can't sit there. My dog's under the seat, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like they've just insulted my mother or something, and I'm like, no, it's fine. You just have to leave now.
I seem to be a magnet for the kind of people that you think, okay, you're making me feel slightly uncomfortable. Like they will seek me out and sit themselves down next to her. And I don't know whether it's because they think, oh, she can't run off. I'll go and sit with her and say hello. I don't know what it is, but my God.
They do this thing where you're like, oh, that poor person with the disability.
Yeah.
I bet you nobody's talked to them for a week.
Yeah.
Oh, I should really just say hello.
Yeah.
And you're like, rah.
Alice, did I ever tell you the story where I was in the supermarket around Christmas time about 5 or 6 years ago, where a Salvation Army lady, so the Salvation Army, like, I'm not quite sure how to describe the Salvation Army to Amy, but
we've got it. They ring the bell.
They're international.
So that's okay then.
They're a Christian organization, support vulnerable homeless people mostly. Yeah.
So she stood with a bucket, shaking a bucket in the supermarket, collecting money for Christmas appeal or whatever, and I'm like, fair enough, it's absolutely admirable. Thank you very much. And she came over to me and loudly said, very slowly, would you like a colouring book? And I just went,
fucking hell.
I just went, I'm 23. Like, not really. I was like, if you've got like a gin going, I might have one of them. But
wow.
You do get odd people. It's usually people who shake buckets and they don't quite know what to do with themselves, and you think, yeah, all right, but I'm not going to sit here and like tell you what is wrong with me just to like calm your curiosity.
Happy.
Yeah, calm your curiosity.
I'm sure I've said this before, but I lie. I tell mad fantastical stories. Like I was involved in a chemical accident and that's what happened to my sight. Or, I was experimented on and I just woke up one morning and I couldn't see anything. It's a mystery and just shit like that, because like it doesn't work so well now that I live in a small town.
Everybody knows you.
They're like, oh, it's that blind girl that can't keep her story straight.
Yeah, that's right.
But I don't know where this fascination of needing to know your medical history, like just because you're scanning my shopping at the supermarket, like they're going, oh, what happened? And I'm like, nothing happened. I was born. That's it. I wasn't abducted by aliens. I didn't fall over awkwardly. I didn't have a tree fall on my legs. Just basically, I was born like this, and it wasn't quite as we expected, but it's all right. And I'm thinking, why do you, lady behind the checkout, need to know that information? Just mind your own business. Because it's not like I'm wearing a t-shirt that says, ask me about my disability, is it? Like,
Maybe we need to have t-shirts that just say, I came out of the womb like this, or whatever.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
There's a merchandise idea, Alice.
lABLEd podcast. Fuck off and leave me alone.
That's right. Stop asking.
Yeah, no, it's like a morbid fascination, isn't it? Like, I don't know whether it came from like Victorian times or what, of like, oh, they're a bit different.
People are still, they don't want to admit this. This is like systemic racism a bit, right? Like there's this deep ingrained thing in humans, of course, that disability. Well, I mean, if you go back to caveman days, disability would have meant death.
Yeah.
But like there's all of these negative stigmas, and I think even today, where we think we're all elevated human beings and we're accepting of everybody, and then you say shit like, were you born that way, or like stupid stuff like that. And it just, I think I read this article once. Oh yes, I read an article. Sorry, everybody. About that blindness was the most feared disability amongst tabs. Do you guys use the term tab?
No,
it's not what I'm familiar with.
TAB here in Vancouver, where I am in Canada. TAB is temporarily able-bodied. Because the truth is that nobody is guaranteed to have an able body their entire life, you know? So shit happens. You get hit by a bus or have a stroke or whatever. So tabs are our friends that don't have a disability. But they are genuinely afraid. The number one fear is sight loss. It's the number one fear of tabs in terms of disability. So when you think about it, like the article said something like, you know, could you consider how much your life would change if you, one, you know, had to have your knee amputated or your leg amputated below the knee? And people would mostly go, yeah, okay, you know, I'd have to tailor my pants, or I'd have to use crutches or maybe a wheelchair, but, you know, I could still go to the movie theater, I could still go out for dinner, you know, I could still drive my car. So they justify that. Same thing with hearing loss. Okay, well, I could still see my friends and maybe I'd have to get a hearing aid or whatever. But the sight loss one is the big one. It's like, you cannot imagine how your life is going to change when you don't see stuff. You know, I can't cook for myself. I can't pick my own clothes. I can't go shopping. I can't drive. I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. And of course, all of those of us who live with sight loss know that that's not true. That there are ways of doing things, but it's a fear of people. And I think they look at those of us with disabilities and kind of want to gauge whether we have a decent life just in case it happens to them. You know,
I never thought of it like that. That's really interesting.
I get this sense sometimes when people are talking to me that they really, you know, there are some people that are just jerks and they're just, you know, they don't know what end is what, but there are some people where I just feel like they're so worried about, like, how did this happen to you and could it happen to me?
You know? Now you say it, Amy, I think there is legs to that theory, because it's like, oh, if I can stay away from whatever happened, whatever happened to her.
My learning moment.
Yeah.
It's the there, but for the grace of God go I, isn't it? You know,
I have a few friends who have, like, they've acquired their disability, so they've had a stroke or something's happened to them, which means they lose mobility or something like that. And the amount of people that have turned around to me and said, I really don't know how you do it. And I sort of say, well, I was born like this, so this is my normal. I hate that word. My normal. So I have never known any different. And all right, so it may look like I struggle to get in and out of bed, or, you know, struggle to do certain tasks, but I manage them because I know I've got a knack of doing them independently. And they're just like, I don't know how you do it, but I forgive them saying things like that, because I know at the time when they're trying to get their head around everything, it's just like a bomb's gone off in their head and they're trying to, like, piece everything back together again, in a way that, you know, they're never going to get that mobility back in some cases.
Well, and I mean, we talked about this in my episode of the podcast that we did really early on. You know, my sight condition is degenerative, but it's pretty stable, and actually I've got a decent amount of central vision. My detailed vision's not great. My peripheral vision is non-existent. But
that sounds like an RP.
It is. It's bang on the money.
Give that woman a washing machine.
I said, somebody asked me before what it was, and I explained what I had, and she said, "Oh, that's is that RP?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, yes, that's a popular one."
Ching 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 ching.
Top.
I was like, "Oh, great! I'm the hipster of sight loss."
Again,
but you're still not the number one. So
no, that's true. And so it is the idea of losing what sight I have left to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that does scare me. It is something that, like I said to Lucy, it's not something I think about very often, because it is scary for me. And one of the things that is particularly difficult about thinking about it is, as someone who has had sight and has had vision, I can't, in my head, I physically can't picture what it will be like to not see. I can imagine myself in situations where I can't see, but you can't, in your mind, sort of prepare yourself for it in that fashion, because you imagine yourself doing something, you automatically see it. At least that's my experience as somebody who has got sight and who has had sight. So it's, I do understand that element of being scared of the not knowing and the uncomprehending of how a person manages. The issue is the sort of the fetishization and the stigmatization of it, of people going, oh, well, you know, well, how do you do that? That's weird. And rather than going, you know, I would much rather somebody came up to me and said, I'm interested to know, you know, what do you struggle when you make yourself a cup of coffee? And it's like, I wouldn't say I struggle. I stick my fingers in the hot water to make sure I know where it is. But, you know, I wouldn't call it a struggle, but you do learn the ways around things. And I think for tabs, as you beautifully put it, it's my new favorite thing.
Yeah, I think can we adopt that? Is that okay? Can we?
Oh, please.
I feel like we need to have labeled and then like tabled or something. There's something there.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Where we invite able-bodied people to ask questions to us about.
Oh, fuck yes!
Yes!
Oh my god, I fucking love it.
A great show here in Canada called "You Can't Ask That," and it's a half-hour show, and they get people with disabilities together in sort of their group. So they'll get a bunch of people who are blind or partially sighted. They'll get some people with mobility disabilities. They'll get some people with facial differences. And they'll look at cue cards, and it'll say something like, "What's wrong with your face?" Right? Like, but the show's called "You Can't Ask That." And so, you know, some of them say things like, you know, "How do you have sex?" And it's like, well, first of all, that's none of your business. And second of all, but it's all of the questions that people are so dying to ask. And then
the questions people really want to ask, but don't.
That's exactly it.
A few years ago, I used to do a Twitter thing, like a Twitter Q&A that was like, ask Lucy. And I was like, you can basically ask me anything. And everybody was like, anything. I was like, literally anything. I am prepared to answer your questions if it will stop you asking that stupid question in general.
Yeah. And of somebody who might really be upset when you ask them.
Exactly. I mean, I think there's legs with that. That's podcast number 2.
Yeah. Let me be your teaching moment.
Yes.
I volunteer to be your teaching moment.
Yeah. Well, especially, you know, we're lucky that we're kind of thick-skinned enough to be able to laugh when people ask us ridiculous questions. There are people out there who, and I think I probably was one of those people, you know, for a long time, that you ask about my disability, and I used to find it really hard to talk about.
Yeah. It really does depend on where you are in your journey, where you are with your own level of self-confidence about who you are. And it does make it, like Lucy said, it does make a big difference whether you have a congenital disability or an acquired disability. And that makes a difference in a lot of cases to how people are, maybe how quickly people are able to adjust to their new circumstances.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Amy, because I am, like I say, I've never known any difference. So to me, this is just like, it's always been like this, you know. Like people somebody once asked me, they said, if you had the opportunity to have like working legs and no cerebral palsy for a day, would you? And then just a day, would you do it? And I was like, no. Why would I do that? I just make myself miserable, because then I realised
it's not worth it for a day.
No, I was
waste of a wish. If you could do anything for a day, you talk to cats. Everybody knows that's right. What you do. That's how you spend your magic 24 hours. Fuck walking.
I always said that if I woke up in the morning and discovered I could walk, I would have, when I was a kid, I used to say I'd have the day off school, then I'd climb a tree, and then I'd go disco dancing. That was my 3, like proper dancing, not just like from the elbows dancing that makes me look like my great aunt May.
Hey, listen, what's wrong with from the elbows dancing? That's
mean,
how I dance.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but I mean, it's so embarrassing. I've got no rhythm at all. So like, I go to concerts and they're like, "Clap your hands," and I'm like, "Really?" Because I can't really get the rhythm.
Likely to take my fucking eye out.
I can't do this. So yeah, they were my 3 wishes. That if I woke up and discovered I could walk, I would climb a tree, go disco dancing, and then do all that kind of stuff. But why would you have it for a day? You'd want at least a lifetime guarantee that it was going to stick, wouldn't you? Really, if they were going to have a wish where you could like make your legs work. I'd also want legs that were long.
We got to learn to flip that question back on tabs and be like, well, if you had one day where you couldn't use your legs, what would you do with that day?
Yeah.
Just see what they say.
Sit in bed
I
with
don't
Netflix,
know.
probably. Like,
yeah.
Watch-
And they'd be like, "Oh yes, a day off work," and you're like, "No, that's not what the point of this exercise is."
You wake up in the morning and you have no movement, say from the waist down. How do you find? And you sort of have. They'd be like, "Oh well, I'd spend the day in bed." What about when you need to go to the toilet?
Yeah.
Or what about when you want a cup of coffee? Literally. I used to do, I might have told you this story previously, Lucy. I used to do disability awareness training, and one of the things I would always do is I'd start prepping people for like, oh, we're gonna have a couple of more minutes, and then I'm gonna let you have a fag break, 15 minutes, you can go do whatever. But what we're gonna do beforehand is we're just gonna try and get in the heads of some people with different disabilities and see what this is like and things like that. And so I'd have the blind glasses and the earmuffs and a wheelchair and stuff like that, and I'd be like, give everybody a thing and be like, oh, just put this on for a bit, experience it, imagine what it's like to have limited sight. No. And then I go, okay, brilliant. And now it's your fag break, but you have to stay disabled.
Yeah.
And you'd be there in the conference room on the 3rd floor, and the woman in the wheelchair who wanted to go downstairs and have a cigarette is like, but there's only stairs in this building. And I'm like, yep. And it's that
you're gonna have to wait there, Lindy.
Yeah. Sorry, love, no fag for you.
Now imagine the building's on fire.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it?
How are you getting out? Oh, guess you're not.
Yeah. It used to like where in my old previous job, it used to because they used to say, I had to get in a lift to go up to my office, which is fine. And it was like, where my office was, it was like a rabbit run of getting through tight doorways and stuff. We managed it. But I said to my boss at the time, I was like, if there's a fire, what do I do? And he was like, oh, you go and sit by the window because it's a fire, like a fire trap. So
an egress?
And I just sit by the window, and like the fire alarm would go off, so I'd sit by the window. But you could see them all downstairs panicking. But like, Lucy's up there. I was like, yeah, well, you told me just to sit here, so I'm going to sit here and make you feel really guilty.
My favourite thing in my old job was they were like, don't use the lift. Absolutely do not use the lift if there's a fire. And I was like, what do I do if there's a fire? And they're like, get in the lift.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So do the thing that you've just spent 10 minutes telling everybody else not to do.
They volunteer you as a tribute. Like, you try the lift.
Yes.
It is just, and it is that. But I quite like it when they get a moment of realisation of, this is really quite difficult, isn't it? Because like for me and for Alice and for Amy, we probably like factor in these things without even having to think about it. Like we just do it automatically. Whereas these people are like, oh my God, I never even thought. And I'm like, well, no, but that's our superpower, isn't it? That's our special skill set. Being able to think ahead for every eventuality and go, oh, hang on a minute, that's not going to work. It does make me feel like Wonder Woman.
I have to remember that when somebody asks me about my superpower, because I don't know about you all, but it seems to be one of the questions that gets asked of people with disabilities too. It's like, if you had a superpower, and they expect me to say that I'd like to have like, the ability to see through walls because I don't have the ability to see walls at all. You know, it's like,
That,
yeah,
again,
okay.
that seems like a waste of a wish.
I know, that's exactly what I'm saying. So I have to remember, you know, I have this, I'm very, very, it's very hard for me to remember these great punchlines in the moment.
Yeah.
And so people ask me stuff and then I think, oh, you know, like Lucy said this great thing once, oh, channel it. And then something blah comes out that's not funny or exciting or
I always
anything.
think people who ask you those kinds of questions or sort of expect those kind of answers from you are the same people that have to have a sit down when you sort of point out to them, people have these ideas of mermaids being really sexy. And it's like, it's a half woman, half fish, and you've got to have sex with it. Which end do you want to be the fish end? And which end do you want to be the woman end?
Is it? It's like that would you rather question, isn't it? Like
yeah.
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 the whole thing about like inspiration porn and things like that when you've got a disability that I really struggle with. Like I've said to Alice in previous episode that I am very uncomfortable with the I word. Like I don't like it at all. What I do like to do is encourage people. So if they look at me and they hear my story and take time to listen to me and things, and they are encouraged to then do something that they would have never even thought of doing or trying something new, that maybe their mindset previously had stopped them, then that's fine. But to inspire them is...
It's the one like thing I have decided what I'm gonna say, because again, you know, you get this all the time, which is, wow, I've really been inspired. You're such an inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
We make fun of that in disability theater all the time about inspiration porn and that stuff. The thing I say to people, and I say it really bluntly, and it's not meant to be funny, but what I say to them is, you can call me an inspiration when I cure cancer.
Yeah.
When I do something that's truly inspirational, please use that word. But if you're going to call me an inspiration for tying my shoes and getting out of bed this morning, making myself my own... oh my God, my socks match? Incredible. You know, then that gets to be hard. And again, it wouldn't be so hard to hear if you didn't hear it over and over and over and over and over again, like you were a 2-year-old.
If you heard it once in a blue moon, you go, oh, thank you very much. That's a nice compliment.
You'd let it go, right?
And
yeah.
Every time you open your mouth.
And it is the kind of the people seem to say it about the most mundane things, the things that I think, remember until the day I dropped dead. About 18 months ago, I was doing something for work, and I work in social care. I was supporting a lady whose husband had a really hideous, horrible, aggressive form of dementia, and he was on death's door, and she was fighting tooth and nail to make sure that he had the care he needed, funded by the NHS, right up until the day that he dropped dead. And we spent an hour in this meeting with a load of professionals basically going at her about what her husband could and couldn't do. And she had to sit there, you know, she'd been married to the guy for 60 years or something. She was not a young woman.
Yeah.
And she had to listen to them tearing her husband's abilities apart. And, you know, she already knew that she lived in a place where that she lived in a world where her husband barely remembered her and didn't remember her children and stuff like that. And all I had done was take notes and prompt her to remember to mention things that we had talked about in a previous meeting, because I was there to support her. Was not there to support her husband. And we walked out afterwards and she said, I think you're really brave. I'm not the one who's just had my 60 years of marriage and my husband raked over the coals in front of me for money, no less. And you're telling me I'm brave? I don't know how she sat there for an hour.
Yeah.
No. I always like to follow up, because I can kind of sense when the inspiration word is being used because they don't know what else to say. Do you know what I mean? So
yes,
when I sense that the reason why they're just using it's just like a filler word, which is even worse than calling me an inspiration because I got out of bed and put my shoes on.
You haven't actually inspired them. They just can't. They're just vocabulary is so shit. They can't think of anything better.
So I will often say, like, well, can I ask why? And they'll go, well, you just are, aren't you? And I'm like, no, give me a reason why, because I just am is not really a reason. Do you know what I mean? And I can remember doing a talk to like a group of sort of elderly ladies,
like a WI or something.
Yeah, that kind of like, you know, Jam on Jerusalem type thing. And I don't really know why I went, like why they asked me to go, but they wanted me to go and talk about my disability in my life with cerebral palsy. And so I did. And my mum did the first bit, and she was talking about my birth and, you know, and how the difficulties we had, you know, the birth was difficult because my cerebral palsy wasn't diagnosed until I was about 1, sort of 1, 2, sort of toddling age when I wasn't toddling. And I sort of said to my mum, after she'd done a bit about the birth, I then took over and did the rest of it. And I said, well, you're cheery, aren't you, Mum? Kind of bringing the mood down. And she, the last thing I said was like, you know, no matter what you feel, please don't call me an inspiration because it makes me feel very uncomfortable. But if I've encouraged you, then that's fair enough. And this woman, not only the first words out of her mouth, she sort of grabbed hold of my hand and said, I think you're an inspiration. And then I thought, well, clearly first of all, clearly she's not been listening. Secondly, the next thing that came out of her mouth was, I think you may have cured my bipolar because next time I feel sad, I'm going to think of you. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
I don't think I am Jesus, but I mean, how do I respond to, I think you've cured my bipolar?
You know, if you're Jesus, can we have a conversation about like bags and pints of water that I've got sitting around and how I could have that turned into wine, please?
Yes, okay. We can discuss that at a later date. But I mean,
superhero.
But I mean, I was like, well, first of all, if I've cured your bipolar, which is an actual recognised medical condition that you can, it can be sort of treated and not like cured, but
managed,
manageable.
Can be managed,
it can also be life-threatening,
of course. And and I'm not saying anything about people who have bipolar. I'm not denying its existence. However, I do not think that in my skill set as somebody with cerebral palsy, up on the list of things I am able to do is cure people with mental illness. Because if
what I hear when you say that, Lucy, is that this person was saying to themselves, and I'm going to put it as bluntly as they were probably thinking about it, is you have it so much worse than I do.
Yeah.
That I'm not going to complain about. I'm going to be happy with my bipolar.
That's exactly what I went away with.
Yeah, feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, because I just thought, well, I don't think I've got a bad life at all. In fact, I quite like my life.
Yeah.
My disability makes it for an interesting life. I'm never boring at dinner parties. It's a great icebreaker, really, if you think about it. But I never ever play top trumps with other people who've got disabilities. Like I don't sit with Alice and go, oh, well, you're blind. Well, I can't walk, or, because why are you doing, there's no point in doing that. Alice probably struggles with things that I wouldn't struggle with, but,
and vice versa.
Exactly. And I would never pit like one disability against another.
We call that the disability hierarchy. I don't know if that's something that's familiar to you all, but it's a real thing. And not only that, but I don't know if you find this, but I have noticed this more and more. I guess the longer I've lived, and I've lived with my disability now for 15 years officially. But the longer I live with the disability, and I'm very involved in our disability community, so I know lots of folks. ableism within the disability community is like ripe and ready to pick.
Yeah.
Like it is there, and if you put us in the right environment, like your government comes to you and says, we can either make education accessible, or we can increase, disability funding, or we can put ramps in, and everybody is fighting for what their piece of the pie.
Yeah.
And they start to forget about the fact that there's a community here, and let's look at things from a community perspective.
Yeah.
But it's very, very easy to be like, okay, listen, I got to get mine. And so the ableism in the hierarchy is a real thing. Rears its ugly head every once in a while.
And it's hard as well, because for lots of people, myself included, I have always had my disability, but it didn't really impact my life a huge amount until I was in my teens. So I was more or less brought up non-disabled by non-disabled parents. So it took a really long time for me to get out of that headspace of going, well, there's something wrong with you if you've got a disability, because that is the idea that is championed outside of the disability community. So there is a huge swathe of people within that community who are already just going, well, I need to get mine, and for all these other people, there's something wrong with them. We are conditioned in the disabled community to have to fight for everything tooth and nail. And so there is, I think, an element of going, well, I'll throw anybody else under the bus because you have to.
I went to a special, what they were called at the time, a special school. So I grew up.
I think they're still called special school.
Yeah. I hated that term, really, because special to me makes it sound like we're all geniuses. And believe me, the people I went to school with, some of them not geniuses at all. Sorry if you're listening. I just realised somebody from school may listen to this. But there was members of staff at school who could not fathom the reason why there was so much like teenage angst and argy-bargy, like just normal teenage rows over silly little things. But it would run a lot deeper sometimes, and I think that's because we were all disabled, and I'm not saying everybody in the disabled community hates one another, but there is a lot of, well, what's wrong with you then? Oh, so you can't do this. Well, I can't do this, so that makes my life even more difficult. Like I'm proving a point. And the member of staff was like, why can't you just be all understanding, and haven't you got empathy? And I was like, doesn't work like that though, does it? Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And
I think that one of the I was thinking about this the other night. One of the things about humans, and I think it's part of the reason that there's so many, you see all problems with racism and gender prejudice and stuff, is part of fundamental humanity. Is there's kind of a tribalist element to it. We have to look after our own and look after our patch, in our territory, because that's what we did when we lived in trees. And despite the fact that that was however million years ago, and despite the fact that we think, we've now got democracy and art and we've risen above that, well, the fact that a black man will still get shot in the street by the police because he's got his hands in his pockets, or a disabled person will still get just for going out of the house.
I hate that noise, by the way. I hate that. No, because say something that backs up that. No, don't just go at me, because that.
My problem is whenever I hear that noise, my dog assumes that somebody's talking to her, so she stops doing whatever I've asked her to, and it's just like, hello, my new best friend. Which usually means I'm on the floor, just like, Lola?
Where are you?
Yeah. Somebody went, 5 miles away, Mum.
In the artwork that I do, in the theater work that I do, a lot of it is disability theater. I do some mainstream theater as well, but disability theater is fun because we get to take some of these concepts and, like we were all just talking about the hierarchy and the pitting against each other. And a good friend of mine who's a quadriplegic and myself rewrote the lyrics to Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better. from Annie Got Your Gun, right?
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
did it. We wrote it as anything you can't do, I can't do better.
Yes.
Right.
And we played
I
and we
love it.
sang it. And of course, he's a quadriplegic, so the very like it's exactly it's like, well, you know, I can't do this and I can't do that, and you can't do this and I can't do that. And at the very end, he says to me, and of course, it all rhymed. It sounded really good. And at the end, he says to me, you know, my dear sightless lass, I can't wipe my own ass. and you should have just heard the audience was like roaring. It's like the win. But wait a minute, he can't wipe his own butt. But he won, right?
Yeah.
And so it felt like this great victory. And I, you know, so I just turned to him and I go, "You win." You know?
Amy, I know that like previously we talked about how we personally use humor to cope with the darker side of stuff. Do you think humor is helping sort of open able-bodied people's eyes to disability? Do you find that is a way of getting the message across in a nice, neat package? You know,
I think that there's probably a fine line between whether it is laughing with and versus laughing at. I think there's probably a fine line. But I think, you know, in terms of like theater in general is a place where people go to share a common experience, right? And so whether it's that you're learning something or experiencing something or laughing at something or whatever it is that you're doing, theater bonds people in a way that it doesn't matter what your skin color is or what your age is or what your profession is. You're all there together to experience this one thing. And when I do disability theater, it's largely with an entire cast of people with various disabilities. It shows that we've written ourselves, but very high quality shows. We're not, this is not, oh, look at the bunch of cripples on the stage. Oh, aren't they doing a great thing? And I have been to some of that theater and I find it so atrocious. But this is really like empowering theater where we're making statements. We're poking a little bit of fun at our tab friends, but we're also inviting them into our world. And I think that's where the key is. It's like, listen, if I can just invite you in for a minute, you'll see that it's not that scary. You'll see that I have developed ways of coping, self-love, of empowerment, of all of these things. And again, like I realize that that's, you know, fairly generalist because there are some people that live with disabilities that can't get to these places. You know, like emotionally, they can't get to a place where they're like, I'm cool with who I am. It takes a lot of work to get there. It's not so easy. And I don't mean to trivialize that. But I think when we're trying to share with the able-bodied world the fact that we're just human beings like the rest of you. And so what if I stick my finger in my cup so that I know, you know, how far I filled my glass with water or tea or whatever it is. That's just the way I do it. I mean, if somebody comes into my house and they go into my shower and they see an elastic band around my shampoo bottle and they go, well, I don't get it. And it's like, well, my shampoo bottle, my conditioner bottle are exactly the same shape.
Yes.
So how else do I know the difference between the two? Yours says you can read shampoo on yours and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and it could be the same for the salt and pepper shaker. So I come up with a way of making it, you know, when you're in my house, you'll see these things, but when you watch me in my house, you won't actually know that I don't see because it's so second nature to me. And I think that's the beauty.
That is the thing, isn't it? My house is my house and I can do this is the thing about the pandemic. Whilst being stuck in the house for vast amounts of time is extremely heartbreaking. I mean, I've not seen anybody other than my mom, my dad, and my sister since November, maybe. I don't know like exact dates, but it can be extremely tiring, and you know, I can get very down about it. However, the one thing I have realized, this was in the middle of the night the other night when I got up to go for a pee, was the fact that I've been able to go about my daily business without anybody going, oh my God, you're such an inspiration, or how do you do that? Why is that like that? And that's because I have been in my own home environment where everything is geared up for me.
And you can just be.
And I can just be me, can't I? And I think when I go back into the outside world again, it's going to be a bit of a
We're going to have to learn to readjust to all those stupid things that people say.
Yeah, because you're like going to go, but aren't we going to go, oh, not this again. This still hasn't gone away.
I was going to say, are we going to learn to readjust, or are we going to go, we've just lived the past however many months not dealing with this. I'm not going to fucking deal with it anymore.
Maybe.
That's certainly what I'd like to see.
Is this the new revised policy of disabled behaviour? Maybe, I don't know.
Vive la revolution!
But that was quite, to me, I thought that it was that was the kind of, this Monday I had an absolute pig of a day, and I just cried all day because I just thought, I can't take any more bad news. I'm sick of the same four walls. Do you know what I mean? I got over it. I had a day of crying and I got over it. It was fine. But then when I realised, actually, I've been able to live my life for the past however many months it's been, completely without anybody going, like, cheering from the rooftops every time I blink or, like, make myself a cup of tea. And I think, actually, when I thought about it like that, I was like, actually, that's quite a nice thing to have happened to me.
Liberating.
Yeah, even though I have been on my own and nobody has been there to see it, like, it's been quite a nice experience.
One of the things we've been kind of advocating for in Canada is, and again, I don't know what the British government has done in terms of trying to help people through pandemic and all that, but in Canada they created what it's called the CERB. It's the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit.
Right.
And so you were able to apply for it if you were out of work, and it was $2,000 a month, $2,000 a month. And so you were eligible for however many months. And I think it went for 6, 8. I mean, like, people were raking in 15, 16, 17, like up to $20,000. So what's that, like 10 months? But the disability benefit for people with disabilities was $1,000 roughly a month. And so, like, here's the government coming out saying, okay, people, we know that you've lost your jobs. We know you have rents and mortgages and groceries and kids and, the very basic minimum, which of course, $2,000 is still, like, not really enough to live on for a month. But the very basic minimum that we can provide you, to will allow you with some kind of quality of life is $2,000. And of course, the disability community was like, holy fucking shit. Are you completely kidding me here? That you expect me to live on $1,000 a month, including everything, my rent, my groceries, my adaptive equipment, everything. But all the able-bodied people get $2,000 a month. And so my hope is that, once we come out of pandemic, it's the same thing that you've heard for years about employment. And it's like, I live with a disability. Can I work from home? Oh, no, we're not set up for that. Really? Because the minute the pandemic hit,
it's almost like you've said, I want to eat your baby. And they've gone, oh, no way.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you want to get an education? No, you can't do that from your computer. I'm so sorry. We're not set up for that. And now, we realized how quick and easy it was to pivot to that. And so, my sincere hope is that these gaps that have been identified, and let me be clear, I mean identified by tabs in the mainstream population, not by marginalized people, because we have known for eons that these gaps have existed, and nobody listens. I'm hoping that we can see some kind of change there. I'm not an optimistic person, and generally speaking, I'm a realist. But I that's my hope for 2021 and maybe moving forward, is that we can just be a little bit more open about these things, because we've proven that it's doable. And I've been privileged to work from home for the last year, whereas the year before I didn't have employment at all. But now that it was available from home, people are like, hey, do you want a job? And I was like, hey, yeah, I can do that from home.
I work from home, and I have done for the last 2 years. Coming up for 2 years. And can I tell you, these people that are saying, oh, working from home is really difficult, I find it a real struggle to work from home. I'm like, what are you talking about? I literally roll out of bed, go downstairs, put the kettle on, and I am at work. Like, I can crack on at 6:30 if you want me to. Do you know? Finish early. And it's really hard. This is really hard. It's really difficult. And I'm like, Do you really want Susan from accounts interrupting you every 5 minutes to show you pictures of her?
You and fucking Lucy's got a real thing about this imaginary Susan from accounts.
Everybody knows a Susan from accounts, is all I'll say.
I love it. I love it. I might have to borrow that one.
Calm down, Susan.
Susan from accounts, showing you pictures of her cats.
Yeah.
When I talk about accessibility with anybody, but in my profession as well, it's all about options. There is no checklist, right? This is check. Yep. We're providing this in a Word document, therefore it's accessible. Check. We've got ramps, therefore the building's accessible. Yep. It's about options and opportunity. So if somebody wants to work from home, give them that opportunity. If somebody wants to come into the office, give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
That's their option.
Yeah. My husband's work, middle of sort of September time when we were starting to open things back up here, they sent an email out to everybody going, who would like to come back into the office? Yeah. And my husband was like, not fucking me.
Yeah.
Like he gets up at 9:04 and is like at his computer ready to work, and that's great. Whereas when he had to drive to work, he was getting up at 7 and having to drive for an hour. I can absolutely understand why a person would want to stay working from home if that was their options.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you can understand the opposite, which is I'm dying to get out of these four walls. Mm-hmm. I need some people, even if it's only 2 other people in the office and we're shouting at each other, across the room and saying hello in the morning. I need that.
Yeah, I'm very lucky because my team, even though I work from home, my team, we have meetings and my line manager said to me when I started, oh, thank goodness you live in Birmingham because now I don't have to travel to London. We can meet in Birmingham because it's in the middle and everybody can sort of congregate in the middle. It's really easy. And we go for cocktails. So we have a marketing meeting and then we have cocktails.
Love it. Love it.
Which is, and that for me is enough to make me go, okay. So we do that every 3 months or something.
It's about meeting everybody's needs and whether those needs are about disability access or they're about mental health and self-care and well-being.
Absolutely. And can I just say though, I do advocate a cocktail at every staff meeting possible. It helps, really helps.
Food and booze.
Can I also say that that's my line manager and my line manager's manager as well, and she's like, another one. Yeah. God knows what the sort of stuff I agree to, but it's really nice to kind of it takes the pressure off a bit as well because we understand that we don't always get to see one another, and so we make sure we have a good time whilst we're out. And I am always very happy to go for cocktails.
My work these days, probably like both y'all's, consists of an awful lot of Zoom meetings. But what I find is interesting is that just the other day we had a Zoom social, and I joined this arts company late. I joined during the pandemic. And so learning from all of them that, one of the things that they do is Friday afternoon cocktails, and they're always partying together, and they're always every time there's a show released on stage, they get together and they have a gathering, and so these people are all really close to each other. But it's so interesting to me how different a Zoom social is from a Zoom work meeting, because you feel like they should all be the same because they're both over Zoom. But it's like these social events, and literally we had a social event at 4:00 in the afternoon. Workday's not over till 5:30. So we're all working, doing our thing. Then at 4:00 the social happens, and it's these people have transformed into different human beings. And now all of a sudden it's you're dropping the F-bombs and you're talking about this drunken thing you did this one time, and then this chick you slept with, and it's oh my God, who are these people? But it's so much fun. I tell you, it is so much fun.
I do find it kind of being at home sometimes, it is a bit harder to get my head into that kind of professional space. I do a lot of talking to GPs and consultants and health and social workers and stuff like that as part of my job. And I was talking to somebody, and I think they'd called me up out of the blue after I'd left them a voicemail like 2 weeks ago or something. And so I couldn't remember the exact details that I was looking for. And so I was there and I said, oh, it's something, something, something. And then they went, oh, I thought it was. And I went, and I, honest to God, on the phone to a social worker, nearly went, oh, fuck yeah, I'm talking out my ass, sorry. And I went, oh, no, you are correct. I was misremembering. But you have to kind of screw that professional head on. I think that's quite hard when you're working from home.
Yeah.
So you were sort of talking about the arts company that you work for, Amy, and I know that you do a lot of work with Vocalize, who do theatre descriptions and stuff like that. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about art and theatre and your podcast and accessing art?
Gosh, so much to unpack there, Alice. I feel like I'm going on vacation and I get this big suitcase. No, it's all good. It's all good. I know that you folks have Vocal Eyes in the UK, that maybe you're familiar with, or some of your listeners are familiar with. And here in Vancouver, we have Vocal Eye with no S.
Okay.
And we're cousins. We're cousins. We're completely separate entities, but we do similar things. And even some of your colleagues from Vocal Eyes have, during this pandemic, we've created something locally here in Vancouver called the Describers Cafe. And so it's people who use description and describers that are getting together to just like continue their professional development around description, the art of description, which is, it's such an interesting art form to me, because I think what tends to happen is people go to the blind community and say, what do you like in your description? Which is not a bad thing. I totally believe that the community needs to have input in that. But there also is, best practices and a framework in place and conventions, just like there is for closed captioning. Like, what's the font style? What's the font size? What's the contrast? How many lines per? So there's these conventions that are in place for description as well. And I find sometimes that when you say to a blind person, well, what do you like in your description? They can give you a whole bunch of information that is maybe very pertinent to them specifically, but not to the community at large. And so you have to be thinking about the larger community and what people need to hear to actually have the description translatable to them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's about making sure that I've said this to my husband before, it's in a lot of ways, it's about getting the right information across.
Yeah, and it's very challenging. It's not easy. Yeah. I have the same with my family, who always want to jump in and describe something that we're watching on television or where we're out in the world, and it's like, oh man, you might as well just keep your mouth shut, because I'm not appreciative. It's just that I don't get a lot of information out of listening to people ramble, right? Like, description is put together very purposefully, very concisely, very contextual, and I think people forget about the context. What's described is often based on context, which is hugely important.
And bad description can ruin the whole experience.
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah, bad description is worse than having no description.
Yeah.
If I'm taken out of the storyline, and I have 1,000 examples of this happening, but when I'm taken out of the storyline, or if I'm lost because of something you've said, then I might as well not have been participating the whole time, because you're just left behind. So a part of what I do with Vocal Eye is I'm their community outreach coordinator here in Vancouver, and I bring the blind community together. And Vocal Eye, because we're not doing live arts description at the moment, which is what we would have done pre-pandemic, is we've pivoted to online art, and so we're watching some streamed things. So a lot of arts companies now have released the streamed video of whatever production they're doing.
Yeah.
And our describers have learned how to audio edit these videos. And so now they're embedding it's a huge pivot, because otherwise they'd be doing it live. But the power of Zoom does not allow for a lot of cross chatter. So you can't really have something playing in the background and then having the describer come in and say, takes a swig of the whiskey or whatever it is, because it cuts out the sound. So, we call them virtual watch parties, and everybody goes, why are you having a watch party? You're a bunch of blind people. And it's like, We've been over this. We've been over this.
Rewind an hour and a half, you'll find it somewhere.
That's right. And the truth about it is that blindness is such a spectrum that you can be legally blind at 20/200 and have 10% vision and not be a cane user or a dog user and have decent central. And so there's such a spectrum of people that there's probably more people that can still air quotes watch than who can't watch. Just by nature of the way blindness works. So that's some of the work that I do with Vocal Eye, and every Wednesday night we get together and we watch some kind of arts things together, whether it's a live tour or whether it's a stage production or whatever. And it's always described, and we always have Q&As with whoever the artists are, and so that's great and fun stuff. And then during the pandemic, I've done a lot of radio and television stuff with a Canadian media company called Accessible Media Inc. And they have all of their content is accessible. It's all described. It started out, probably 20 years ago, but it was voice print for the blind. So it was the TV channel where you could, as a blind person, turn it on and they would be reading the newspaper. And now, of course, you can get newspapers on many online platforms that are fairly accessible. And so it became a little redundant. So they turned themselves into a television show and a radio show that you can get through your computer. So I do a weekly movie review. Now that I'm at home, it's a Netflix review. So we talk about the show and we talk about the description of the show, and it's just fun stuff. But they were the ones who invited me to do a podcast, or I should say to pitch a podcast idea. And so I pitched about what I know best, I guess, which is the intersection of art and disability. And so, I searched the world literally for artists who identify with disability, any disability. And we talk about their art form, and we talk about any adaptations they might make to, make their art form more accessible to them or to others. We talk to different arts organizations like a Vocal Eye or like a theater company who's specializing in the disability aesthetic for lots of reasons. One is because I feel like there isn't a platform for artists with disabilities to just share what they do. We love what we do as artists, and artists in general, mainstream artists, have a hard time, putting up exhibits or writing books or whatever their art form is, getting noticed. And I just wanted people with disabilities to be able to share what they do proudly and not in an inspiration porn kind of way. And for other listeners to be able to say, hey, you know what? I never thought about being a painter when I was blind. So, if so-and-so is doing this, well, that gives me an idea of how I can do it. Because I think art is one of those things that, unless it's immersed in your life, unless you grow up with it, it's like sports. You just don't really think about it. It's not for me. It's not something I do, not something I go to, not something I dabble in. But when you start to hear that, I call myself an artist of opportunity. So I often listen to artists and what they're doing, and I go, oh yeah, I'd like to try that. How do you and I get together and do a dance show? Or, hey, yeah, I'd like to try sculpting. How do you and I get together and I learn sculpting? So I think for me, because I like to learn what other people do and then figure out if I can do it, that it might be something that a listener would be interested in, right?
Yeah, me too. I love doing stuff like that. It's a great, makes it very interesting at dinner parties, doesn't it? If you can say, well, I've tried that, it's really interesting. So
well, and I think art's quite a lot like sport and like exercise, where there is something out there that would be like your exercise, that if you did it,
yes,
you'd love it, but you're not going to know until you've tried it. And I believe art's the same, you know.
Absolutely.
And I think, for people with disabilities, again, generalization, I realize this, but art was never the thing that, I've done a lot of work with blind kids, for example, and art's never the thing that's like top of mind when you're growing up with a disability, because there are so many other things, right? A lot of it's related to medical, a lot of it's related to learning life skills, to your parents making sure that you're going to have a good education and get a good job. And so a lot of it's not about the extracurricular, which is sometimes art, sometimes sports, whatever. So you could find yourself as, for example, as a blind adult who's never been to the theater, of any kind, or who's never been to an art gallery, or who never thought that was for them or that they could access it or any of that stuff. And so I have a feeling that for some of us in the disability community, we just weren't sort of immersed into the experience or given the opportunity to be immersed and go, it's for me, or no, it's not for me. And so a lot of people, I think, in the disability community come to art later in life, and then have to try and figure out, you know, that the 5 W's of, you know, how do I do this? Why do I do this? Should I do this?
Yeah.
How do I pay for this? Can it give me a job? You know, all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of things to explore in this podcast. And it's a short one. It's a 25-minute-ish podcast. I often go over just a little bit.
Compared to us who go over by a lot.
Oh, well, listen, if I had the ability to go over a lot, I would totally do it. But I guess for me, the beauty and the curse is that I'm under the umbrella of this media company. So I have a framework I have to follow in order to fulfill my contract, right?
Yeah.
And so when they say,
me and Lucy are just chatting until somebody tells us to shut up and go away.
And that's how I would prefer things to be. But because 25 minutes is not a lot of time to be able to unpack different things.
Could you imagine if somebody said to us, right, I've got 25 minutes, we'd be like, we're just
you barely get through the fucking intro.
That's right. It's exactly it.
We'll just do the intro, that's it.
Yeah. So, and I do my podcast fairly similarly to yours, which is I want it to sound like we're just a couple people having a cup of tea at a table. We're just shooting the shit. We're having a conversation. I don't want to go in there with this huge list of questions, which disengage me from listening to who my guest is.
Because you're worried about your list of questions going, I've only got 25 minutes and she's only answered one question.
You know, and oftentimes, I don't know if you guys get this from your guests, but my podcast guests are like, so do you have the list of questions you're going to ask me? And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
We're at a point where we're still pretty much just getting like friends and family on. So they're mostly like, are you going to stop talking so that I can talk now? We haven't quite got to that point of awkward silences of professionals who know what they're doing expecting us to ask them reasonable questions yet.
The beauty of a 25-minute podcast is, I will admit, because I've had a few guests who having a conversation with them has been like pulling teeth. And it doesn't matter how much I laugh or how much I try and add my questions so that I'm filling space. They reply with a yep. And you're like, come on. You know, when we had a conversation about you being a guest on the podcast, we had a conversation. Then all of a sudden you hit the record button and this person doesn't know how to form a sentence. So that, you know, it's a little bit easier to fill 25 minutes if you have to pull some teeth.
I think as well, it doesn't really, I mean, when I used to do hospital radio, there was a red light on the wall, so you were very aware of the fact that you were on air, whereas we haven't really got a red light in the room where I sit and record the podcast. It's just me talking into a microphone until we run out of things to say, and I think that helped. Having the red light on the wall helped. I might have to get one and just like have a remote control.
You need your cue light.
Yeah. Not to be
I mean, we've both commented before that Lucy and I have walked away from recordings and the other people that we live with have gone, did the other person get a fucking word in at all in that whole recording? So we could almost do it like air traffic controller style in front of us going, stop! No more! Shut your fucking mouth!
But also, as well, we've pointed out before how Alice has got a visual impairment. So if I'm like waving my arms about, going like, stop, talking, she can't see me. So we're going to have to work out some kind of system where it's like,
I think we need a code word.
Yeah, I was going to say you need like a safe word, you know?
Yeah.
It's the word
we wouldn't normally use in conversation.
Yeah.
So are the bananas ripe these days? You know, something.
That's what we're gonna have to do.
Get a bell or something.
Yeah.
Or Alice, you're gonna have to tell your husband to come and like knock on the door after 2 hours, and then you're like, oh well, that's my dinner warning.
Yeah.
Dinner's on the table with a nice glass of wine. Hate to love you and leave you, but I'm gonna.
I know, but yeah, and that's the thing. You don't want to cut people off in there whilst they're in like full flow and that you were getting really good stuff, but at the same time you're like, I feel for our poor editor who's got to edit this down. And you're like, where do we start? Where do we go? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I am very glad that we are a chat show, Alice, and we're not stuck to time constraints of like 25 minutes.
It's so much more fun to just, shoot the shit. But here's the funny thing. It's like I'm getting text messages from other people in my house that say, I'm thinking of making some lunch. You want to have some? And I'm like, I don't know. Kind of a podcast guest right now. Not sure when this is going to end. And that's no reflection on where we're going in this, because it's so much fun. But this morning when I woke up, I sent messages to the other people in my house, and I just said, I'm recording this morning. So, that's the signal to like, please don't turn the music up, or no vacuums running, or, please organize your life to fit my life for the next couple of hours. Selfishly. I wish I could say I have a space that's, like a studio space with padded walls and all that fun stuff, but I don't. So I basically have to tell the other people in my life to shut the fuck up so that I could have some time.
I shut the door and I put a folded up cardboard box on the other side of the door so that the cat can't scratch at the door.
Glamour!
Oh, that's brilliant.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been such a joy to talk to you.
This has been really fun, Amy. It's really interesting. Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you so much.
Anytime you guys want to chat, I am
Yes.
around, and we'll make the time difference work for us.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
definitely.
And next time I'm in your area, and I am
100%.
the person who's like, it's like a threat. The next time I'm in town, I'm gonna look you up, and we're gonna go have some cocktails.
Oh yeah,
Because
definitely.
I will actually
yeah.
do this. It may not be for a couple of years, but I will actually do it. So
Amazing.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
and anytime you're in the Vancouver area in Canada, you just let me know when you're coming, and we'll treat you to some good times.
Oh, exciting. Okay. I shall tell my husband. He'll start packing his bag.
It's been a
Thank you
pleasure,
so
my
much.
friends. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Amy. Oh,
Thank you.
Amy, before you go, tell everybody where we can find you on the social medias and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, if you're looking for the podcast, it's called Accessing Art with Amy, and it is on any podcast platform. And I'm on Facebook. It's Amy Amantea, and it's spelt just like a man drinking tea. A man tea. And that's really the best place to find me is on Facebook. And from there, we can connect in all sorts of ways. But those are the two places to find me.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners. We'll see you again next time. Thanks for listening to the lABLEd podcast. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at lABLEd podcast.
Our thanks go to our editor, Adam Hall, our music composer, Maisie Crunden, and our graphic designer, Sarah Coley.
We'll see you next time.